just to start, for anyone who isn't familiar with you, can you tell us who you are and a little bit about your career?
Sure. My name is Mark Pellegrino. I'm an actor in Hollywood. I've been acting for about 30 years. If you don't know me, check out the shows Supernatural, Being Human, Lost, The Returned, just to name a few. A couple of movies that you might know, Big Lebowski. I make an appearance in there, National Treasure, and a bunch of others. But if you don't know me, check out those. I think you'll like the shows.
Nice. And then you've started a political party. When did that start, and what's that about?
I think we started about 5 or 6 years ago. My partner and I had decided that the political landscape was a desert, a philosophical and moral desert, and we decided to make a party that would actually represent the fundamental ethics that we think America stood for, which is individual rights. So we created a platform called the American Capitalist Party, which defines the proper social system and political system as one founded upon individual rights.
On the American Capitalist Party's website, there's a lot of talk about the separation of state and economy.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what is that and why is it important?
I think a lot of the problems that we have today are the result of an enmeshment of economics and the state in the form of the regulatory state. And we have a separation of church and state because we understand that the state cannot meddle in the conscience of a human being. Well, it shouldn't be able to meddle in a human being's associations or in the implementation of their rights, which is the physical implementation of your rights is through your property, through how you dispose of your property, through how you develop your property. That's a requirement. So the state should have no say about whom you associate with and how you use your property unless you harm somebody. So the regulatory state should be out.
Are you for a complete deregulation of the markets, or do you think there should be some regulation just to help the people flourish, or some kind of reasonable regulation, or no?
I don't think there's such a thing as reasonable state regulation. There's laws against force and fraud, as there should be. And I am completely behind private regulation, where people producing products will compete for recognition from certain groups who have a very high reputation for their judgment. Right? At one time, it was the good housekeeping seal of approval that everybody sought, and that was better than a regulator's stamp of approval. And there are, a Michelin star is a massive feather in the cap of any restaurant. And these private entities that spread information should be the ones that, unofficially regulate the economy. It's really you that regulates your own particular economics because you know what your needs are and what your wants are. And you can go to these companies and read about the products and decide for yourself what's good and what isn't, what their practices are, and whether or not you want to, solicit business from a business that is practicing the things that these businesses are practicing. So I'm for private regulation, not state regulation.
Right. No, that makes sense. So this is where somewhat like a woke person might say something about group rights and the fact that some people's voices are not heard very well, and therefore we need these state coalitions and these groups to advocate on behalf of people who maybe don't have a voice in the market very well. Well, how would you respond?
Well,
Does that make sense?
they're not talking about a voice in the market. They're talking about a voice in politics, and they confuse the two. To me, there's two types of power. There's political power, which is the power to compel, and economic power, which is the power to create values and exchange them with other people. And they're very different, but they get conflated. You exercise your voice in the market by either soliciting a product or refusing to. That's how you exercise your vote in the marketplace. Now, a company might not be wiped off the face of the earth like you like it to or want it to for some reason, but that's not really up to you. And you could usurp political power to get that done, but I don't think that's a proper use of government.
And you don't think that, why?
Unless the company is criminal, unless they're engaging in a criminal act. They're offering a product that people want on the market, and they're making a profit and thriving because people want it. They're freely exchanging with others. That's what a market is, right? A market is people freely associating with each other. And do I have a right to stop that? because I don't like something that the company's doing, I don't like the beliefs that they hold, well, I have the right to stop my own participation in that company, but not to forcibly bar other people from participating.
Sure, well, that makes sense. That's a good segue to my next question about the way that big corporations that often have a lot of influence and a lot of power, how they wield that power and their investments and their money to make moral decisions for the rest of society on important issues, because they've gained so much wealth and they have so much power over social and even sometimes political outcomes. How do you feel about when big corporations make those kinds of decisions for the rest of us?
Well, I mean, again, if you're investing in these companies, you have a right to withdraw your capital from them. To the degree that they're using the government to press their agendas on people, to the degree that they're using the government to keep out competition or to hobble other messages out there, then they're wrong. That kind of stuff should be stopped. That's the stuff that we should lobby the government not to do. And that, again, is the separation of state and economics. If you are invested, say, with BlackRock or JP Morgan, they own quite a bit of capital, but you can withdraw yours from them. And there are other markets out there that are refusing to do ESG investments, woke investments that you can participate in. And that is what these guys are going to be competing with. And there's no way they're going to be able to stop that competition, provided the government doesn't step in and prevent that.
So if everyone sort of organically comes to this decision that, we're going to pull our investments and our money from these companies to see a social change, or just because we don't want to support what they're doing, that is the ideal mechanism rather than using political force.
I think that's the ideal rather than political force.
Cool, gotcha, okay.
I mean, the problem today is that we live in a mixed economy, so that there's the line between public and private is really no longer there, right? So if Twitter has a certain policy that we call woke and we don't like, I consider them exercising their private property rights to censor whomever they choose within the realm of a free country. But if they become the unofficial arm of the government and are deliberately in collusion with the government, censoring voices that are dissenting against the government, then that's an entirely different matter that needs to be taken up. And I think there is legitimate political action you can take against that. It's not regulating the company, which is what the Republicans want to do. It's just removing the government from that process and separating the two of them with a hard firewall.
Right, and I think we've learned that is happening at Twitter. That I think the government does end up influencing some of who they do and do not want on the platform and some of their policies, which seems problematic.
It is problematic, but by the same token, I've met a lot of great intellectuals on Twitter. Even though I feel like I'm on the outside, I'm one of those voices that they censor or push down. I've still met Gad Saad and Dave Rubin and Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, who is, I think, banned from Twitter at the moment, right? So some of these people who've been kicked off, but nonetheless had a pretty significant influence on me and I think the rest of the world through that platform. So, Twitter claims to be an open forum for speech. It's not, so it's sort of fraud, right? I mean, I think the kinds of speech that should be banned are force and fraud, libels and slanders, and that's it. Let everybody else, let the world of ideas push themselves out there and see what sticks. I think that's what Elon Musk is trying to go for, and I think that's going to be an improvement.
Yeah, well, that brings me to another question about, when companies like Twitter and YouTube, they clearly have massive influence on the way conversations are had and just on the way that our brains process information, the way that we think. When they do push certain leftist agendas and have this undue influence over the public conversation, does that hurt the free exchange of ideas and leave us worse off? And if it does, what can we do about it?
Again, I feel like to the degree that they're a private company, the only thing you can do is leave and or start your own, the way Parler tried to do. It's not very user-friendly, though. And there's also Trump's platform now that they're out there. There's competing platforms now that, will, I think, help Twitter straighten out its format of what it thinks is proper speech. I think these ideas are terrible, but the worst thing in the world to do is to just let them sit out there without anybody contesting them. And yeah, they might lessen your reach. They might lessen the number of people that see your response to some woke individual, but you get to respond to them, right? And I think that's a plus. And don't you see things turning a little bit? I mean, the government's certainly pushing, the woke ideology down everybody's throat, but in the social realm, people are tired of it. Yeah. I think everyday people like you and I, the politically homeless, the independents out there, are just done. We're fed up with the bullshit. It's patently nihilistic. It's stupid beyond belief, and I think anybody with an ounce of common sense can see that. And it's starting to wear out its welcome. Do you see that, or is it just me?
I do. I do happen to have the unfortunate experience of living in the bubble of the woke capital of the world, Portland, Oregon, or nearby anyway. So I do still see it waning there. Like I said, I've had a lot of people reach out to me, but it's often privately. They'll say like, "Oh, we really love your work, but we can't say anything. I can't say anything publicly because I'm worried." So there still is a bit of this kind of malice.
See, and that scares me, right? I mean, I risk my career by sticking my neck out and fighting woke people online all the time, but it has to be done. I mean, somebody's got to get out there and say enough is enough, right? And the more people it's hard for me to respect people who behind the scenes who do the same thing to me, by the way. "Oh, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you. Thank you very much for not being there with me, and not standing up with me on the front lines." I mean, everybody's context is different, but still, you can't be that cowardly in the face of this kind of bullying, right? You have to fight back.
What would you say, if you could encourage those people who reach out to us privately, what would you say to encourage them to speak up?
I would say if they, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because I really hate putting people in that position where they feel
Sure.
like they're at risk. But by the same token, it's hard for me to respect them unless they do that. Look, I would say, we're sort of at a crossroads. I really feel like Western civilization is teetering. And perhaps we've been there multiple times in the past, but this time it's real. This time we really are at a crossroads, and we're going to go one way or the other. And I really feel like there's a massive group of people who have been educated into thinking that Western civilization, qua Western civilization, is evil and needs to be dispensed with. They see absolutely nothing positive about it at all. Worse, that's just the left. Worse, the right seems to be rejecting the enlightenment and individualism now. I mean, publicly in Prager University videos and in books, the intellectuals of the right are now saying what we need is nationalism, what we need is tradition. Individualism is the reason why we're going off the rails right now. The Enlightenment gave us a mechanistic view of the world, and that's a totalitarian mindset, and they're rejecting it. So we're really, both the establishment options are taking us over the cliff and rejecting the very thing that gave us the liberty and the capitalism that made us thrive. So your survival depends on it. If you think your survival depends on lessening your carbon footprint, it depends even more on saving Western civilization. So whenever you see people knocking it, you gotta fight. You just got to.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, if we have time, I want to come back to the Enlightenment a little bit more, but I want to talk more about woke corporations and that sort of thing. Have you read Vivek Ramaswamy's book, Woke Inc.? Are you familiar with his arguments at all?
No, but I know of it. I've seen him interviewed.
Cool. Yeah, I interviewed him in April. So the general concept in his book is that woke politics are hugely influencing the way that corporations are run and how woke values are pushed on consumers via CEOs and these big corporations. So I'm wondering, I mean, we touched on this already, but if you have any other thoughts, what do we as individuals do to push back against that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one because it's hard for me to believe that so many of these CEOs actually buy that ideology. It's so obviously nihilistic. It so rejects reality on so many levels. I can't help but think that because it's gotten purchased in the culture and with a loud portion of the culture, that they're just afraid and they're reacting more from fear than actual commitment. So I think the more people who come out in support of, a proper orientation towards reality and start rejecting this stuff outright, the more they're going to come around, because in the end, it's the bottom line for them. If people aren't buying their product because of the things that they believe, then they're going to have to make adjustments, I think, with respect to the things that they believe.
Right. When I was interviewing Vivek, he was saying that probably 75% of the corporations and the CEOs are just pushing these values because it's a way to gain more profit and power. But there was something like 25% he thought were maybe true believers who were really zealous for this cause and really did want to push it.
Those folks are scary. All religious zealots are scary, and this is a form of religion, right? It's anti-rational, it's anti-reality, it's anti-identity, and you either believe it as an article of faith or you don't with these people. So, all you can do is keep presenting the facts to these folks and do it as relentlessly as they are trying to tear down the facts.
Right, for sure.
I wish there were a magic pill for something like this. I wish you could say, yeah, there is actually a government intervention you can do, but I think that's terribly dangerous. I think DeSantis doing that in Florida with Disney is a terribly authoritarian and dangerous thing to do. Even though I feel a sentimental attachment to it, I think, yeah, thank God, put these people in their place. They're so obnoxious and they're so loud and they're so horrible and they're so moralistic and nihilistic and awful and they destroy the world. They make it a terrible place to live. Stick it to them. No, you can't do it through government. You really can't, unless they're burning things and breaking things and hurting people, then you can and should step in. But otherwise, it's about changing the culture, which is going to take a lot of time. You figure these ideas have been running around in academia since what, the 50s and 60s? And the proto-versions of these ideas have been in academia for over 100 years. And they're now seeping into our culture. And social media makes it possible for these things to go viral instantly. So whereas before it just might have been isolated pockets of people that were exposed to this, now social media makes it possible for the world to be exposed to it. And then our lexicon starts changing. We start adopting these terms as if they're real because of the great influence of social media. Well, you simply have to start from the very beginning and re-educate people. And that means decoupling state from all of the institutions it's involved in. Academia is a one very important place the state needs to go, right? And then people can choose with their pocketbooks. They can choose whether they want that woke education or whether they want the sciences. Do they want to learn a revisionist history, or do they want to know what really happened, warts and all, but what really happened? And I imagine most parents are going to have their children's interests at heart, and they're going to want math and science and to see the world. They want their children to be functional, not activist neurotics who dye their hair blue and pierce their entire bodies and hate themselves and hate the world. They want somebody functional. And the market, I think, will provide that for them, but over time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I hope you're right. I'm wondering, just on a moral level, we already talked about people using their pocketbooks to basically have sway or to sort of change the culture. But do you have any moral objections to those like 25% true believers that are using their corporations and capitalism in a way that is just really it's really sort of making moral decisions for the rest of society?
Well, again, you mean like BlackRock that has investments from other people,
right?
And is using their money. Again, if you have your money invested in BlackRock, you have the power to take it out, right? You have the power to remove it from that institution, and there are other financial institutions that are gaining power right now as we speak for this very simple reason. And you can deliver that money to them and let them invest for you because they'll have your profits in mind, not the advancement of an ideology. So, is there, can you think of another solution but that? In the end?
No, I think you're right. I think it comes down to changing the culture and educating people to make better decisions to then therefore push against it and just making that individual decision. Because, yeah, I too am wary of political action. I might not be quite as wary of it as you, but I also I don't know. I'm open to having my mind changed about that.
Well, I mean, the government is a gun, it's force, and it has a monopoly on force. You don't use it to advance agendas, you use it to protect people from bad guys and from people who are hurting them. And so that's why it's difficult for me to see using government in any other form. When it's acting for somebody else in a positive sense, it's acting against another, right? It doesn't create values. It can't give somebody something out of thin air. It has to take it from somebody first in order to give it to somebody else. And once you set that precedent, it's really, really hard to break. And it's a terrible precedent to set, because you're saying, well, we say rights are inviolable, but they're not. They're really not. We can, under these certain circumstances, use force against innocent people, or use force against people with whom we disagree. And I don't think that's a good precedent to set.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like to see more of my work, you can head on over to Locals, which is an awesome free speech platform that won't take down or flag any videos, which YouTube is known to do. It's a great platform because people want to be there and they'll engage in meaningful dialogue with you, and it's awesome. Plus, if you sign up for a paid account, you can get access to content that is exclusive to Locals. You'll find a link for that in the description below. Also, if you ever see me lying down in interviews or in any of the videos, it's because I lived with debilitating back pain for years. So I just wanted to explain that so you understand what's going on. And sometimes my little dog Nora might make an appearance. Nora, come here. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. All right. Thanks, everybody.